Welcome to today's lesson, 3.5, Derivative of Trig Functions. We are going to find the 6 derivatives of each of these trig functions. So we're going to figure out what the derivative of sine is, derivative of cosine, derivative of tangent, derivative of cotangent, derivative of secant, and last, derivative of cosecant. So first, I'd like for you to graph sine of x without using a graphing calculator on paper, and it can just be a sketch. Pause the video until you have it complete. Hopefully you have paused the video and you've graphed sine function. It doesn't have to look perfect, but if we're going to find the derivative of sine of x, basically we're going to go figure out what the slope is. So we have some critical values here. We know what the slope is at each of the max and mins. We know that those slopes are all 0. So we could go graph that. So we're graphing the derivative. That happens to be negative pi over 2, negative 3 pi over 2. Also pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. You can just watch. You don't necessarily have to write all this down in your notes. Next, we're going to estimate some slopes at other points of interest. Possibly, we could look right here at 0, 0. What would you estimate that slope to be? Hopefully you say it looks about like 1. So if I come up here to 1. I can also say looks like 1 maybe right here. Maybe over here at the very beginning it also looks like 1. Notice any other values where the slope you can estimate. Hopefully you're thinking right here at negative pi and pi. That slope there looks to be negative 1. I were to graph this slope graph, and I connect them all, hopefully you notice something. So the derivative of sine x looks very familiar to another curve that we are very well known for, and the derivative of sine x happens to be cosine x. So that is your first derivative that you want to write down for your notes. We're going to do something very similar for cosine. But first, I'd like you to guess. What do you think cosine x can be? Write it down. And then I also want you to go graph cosine x. Pause the video until you have both of those done. I hope you've paused the video. Cosine is what we're going to calculate the derivative of here. We're just going to find the derivative graph. So I like to start, I know the slope is 0. I know this slope is 0, and that happens to be at pi. And also right here, there's lots of max or mins. So I've got a slope of 0 at 0, pi, 2 pi, negative pi, and up here at negative 2 pi. So on the cosine function, I just went and found my max and mins, and I know the slope there is 0. I could estimate this slope right here is negative 1. That's at negative 3 pi over 2. I could estimate the slope at negative pi over 2 to be a positive 1. Same thing here. The slope at pi over 2 estimates to be negative 1. And at 3 pi over 2, I could estimate that slope to be positive 1. All I'm doing is just estimating slopes. If I connect those, estimating, that graph looks like something we've seen earlier. Any guesses? A lot of you guys will say sine of x. but this graph is not quite sine of x, because doesn't sine of x go up first, then down? So remember, here's sine of x goes up, then down. The derivative graph that I found looks just like sine of x, only it's been flipped. So what makes the sine of x flip is a negative out in front. So the derivative of cosine is negative sine of x. And go back to your sheet and write that down. Sorry this is so quick, I like to do more of an exploration, but since I'm gone, this will have to do. Be sure you watch the next video.